Thank you so much, my dear Marcykins, for singing us that lovely song that I had no idea was exactly what I needed today. So, hello y'all. A lot of y'all know me. A lot of y'all know me, and a few of y'all have seen me in passing, and some of y'all are like, who is this girl? So, my name is Meadows-Fernandez, and I am many things. I am a speaker, an award-winning writer, a
mother,
a person whose speeches are constantly spoiled because my son has to be the punchline. Yes, and as my son, who is sitting right here, just said, of the many titles that I hold, the one that likely shapes my daily experiences the most is my status as a mother. But today, I wanted to go beyond my individual experience as a mother, though you'll hear pieces of that, and I want to talk about the way we discuss motherhood in general. So I'm asking y'all to sit with me as we kind of go on a little bit of a literary journey, okay? Can y'all do that? All right. Last December, as I visited my loved ones in Texas for the holidays, I learned of another mama whose life had many similarities to my own. Her name was Christina Pacheco. Like me, Christina was in Texas, roughly 30, and married with a son and a daughter. But unlike me, she delivered her daughter, Amelia, via C-section on October 24th, 2022. Initially, Christina felt fine. Her only concern was a fever, but as time passed, the fever stayed and was joined by vision issues and vomiting. While other Americans were finalizing Halloween plans, the Pacheco family was visiting the local emergency room, and Christina was being airlifted to the San Antonio hospital. Something during the C-section left her with a bacterial infection and sent her into septic shock. The infection impaired Christina's heart, lungs, and kidneys. She was given a 20% chance of survival. Doctors placed her on an ECMO, which is an extracorporeal membrane oxygenation machine. Maybe some of y'all are more familiar with doctors, and that would have flown easier off your tongue than it did mine. But they placed her on an ECMO so her heart and lungs could rest, and it took over pumping and oxygenating her blood outside of her body. The machine saved her life, but it required amputating her arms and legs due to the lack of circulation in her limbs. And while I set New Year's goals for healthy eating and regular exercise, Christina was mapping out a goal for how to feel normal after a 3-month hospital stay. But it was the quote from her husband that demonstrated, in addition to her life-threatening experience, she was navigating the same pressures as myself and many other mothers in the world. This is a quote from her husband. I told her, my wife, before she started to really fade, I said, you need to come back for your kids. I need you for your kids. And I'm not interested or informed enough to speculate on their relationship. Everything about the story since has shown them joyfully at home. She's adapted to life. She is getting lots of wonderful things done. But the quote, you need to come back for your kids. I need you for the kids, has been in my head ever since. There are countless reasons I feel invested in Christina's story. It might sound shocking to some of y'all that the relationship between death and motherhood was instrumental on my journey as an award-winning storyteller. In the United States, Black birthing people die at a rate that is 3 to 5 times more frequent than white women. Native birthing people experience similar outcomes, but the pervasive reality of settler colonialism and racism erases them from the data. It's worth noting that Christina was a Hispanic American. She lives in Texas. But she was not outside of this data. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has recently informed us that 84%, or 4 out of 5, of the maternal deaths we experience each year are preventable. Christina's story reminds me of more than numbers. It reminds me of what could have been. I didn't know what to expect when I gave birth to my son in 2016. But I know I lost a lot of blood, and something just felt wrong early on. I was in constant pain. Walking from one side of our narrow bedroom on base to the other was challenging enough, let alone keeping a small human alive. I'll never forget going to the Egg and I. The name has changed now, right? What is it called? Or is it Egg and I? Now it's the egg, but that lets y'all know I've been here a minute. So, I'll never forget walking into the egg and I, ready to celebrate the first Valentine's Day we had as a family of 3, and not being able to eat my food because I looked at my husband and I told him I was in pain. I couldn't take another bite. I needed to go to the restroom, and there was horror and panic as a large blood clot left my body. I was confused when the emergency room physician told me blood clots and pain were normal, even after I showed him one in real time. The pain didn't stop, but neither did I. The world around me suggested, you need to come back for your kids. I need you for the kids. So I listened. My aunts and mother, I wasn't expecting that. My aunts and mother were over the care that I was receiving, and they demanded I come home to Texas. We didn't know it, but I was fighting for my life. This was clearest to me as I laid in the bathtub, feeling faint, surrounded by red water, as my son cried next to me. My aunt walked into the bathroom and demanded that we go to the hospital. By then, it had been many phone calls and roughly 4 or 5 weeks since I'd given birth to my son. We learned I had retained placenta. Like Christina, I had an emergency surgery in Texas, but thankfully there was no infection. My experience forever shaped the way I saw motherhood. It seemed to say, as long as your children are well, it's okay to hurt. It's okay if motherhood brings death as long as your corpse nourishes your children. You need to come back for your kids. I need you for the kids. But what does it mean to come back for our kids? I love my children. Seeing them process the world is magical. They've never known anything but to embrace their full audacity. A rarity for any child, especially 2 young Black children. They challenge every assumption I have about the world, but I hate the way we process motherhood. I often feel hidden in plain sight, hypervisible in crucial moments, especially when things go wrong. When someone turns out differently than how the world expects, everyone asks, where is their mother? It's a loaded question, and it's a lot of pressure to place the total weight of one's holistic well-being and preparedness on one person. Never mind the missing resources, structural obstacles, and lack of support. You need to come back for your kids. I need you for the kids. Though mothers are always in the spotlight, we're also invisible. The world sees us as watered down, fragmented versions of ourselves and what we enjoy. When the reporters shared Christina's story, they rarely mentioned that she's an educational psychologist who is passionate about her work with special education students. She was a mother who needed to come back for her kids. I'm frustrated when I know that I have something to offer to a space, but there's an unspoken expectation that bold children like mine aren't welcome. I'm enraged at how loudly my heart beats and the breath leaves my body when I'm watching in anticipation of them showing up authentically. Those moments make me feel guilty. I'm expected to train them to fall in line, to know their place, even if it costs me everything and their humanity. But I know childhood is a place of transition, not a destination. I wanted to raise them free of the invisible restraints I felt, but I realized that would mean abandoning everything I've been taught about my role as a mother. Securing our collective freedom means being willing to fail at motherhood. It also means embracing that I must be invested in my own life to show my children the goal is to grow. I had to accept that I wasn't dead, socially or otherwise. The more I rebelled from the expectation that motherhood should be rooted in pain or grateful sacrifice, the more my world expanded. I went to graduate school and studied how systems of oppression, namely class-based patriarchy, settler colonialism, and racism, shaped motherhood as an arm of a white supremacist regime. I spent countless hours reading how the institution and the practice of motherhood were distinct. But Partis Sequitur Ventrum, an English legal doctrine passed in 1662 that loosely translates to, the status of the child follows the mother, interested me most. Under that system, Black women were incubators at best, but never mothers. Motherhood was a privilege for the free and the white. Our children were in queue as social capital. Over my coursework, I learned about a concept called social death that was coined by scholar Orlando Patterson. It describes the loss of identity and often humanity that enslaved people experienced. As a Black mother, I knew how social death holds our stories and presents us as less than human. But I also knew that within my community, motherhood was a portal for change and empowerment. I saw those clear parallels, and I knew I had to process them. Both concepts shaped how I moved through the world. I realized I couldn't offer my children a freedom I hadn't experienced. To honor my full humanness, I had to choose to mother from wholeness. But motherhood is not all that I am. We are living in a time, getting pregnant and giving birth is a choice between life and death. But every day, we're okay with mothers and birthing people dying to themselves under the expectation to be all for our children. We have the skills, but struggle to work because birth and motherhood bring near-death experiences. And I won't even elaborate on the cost and availability of childcare. The medical care industry often leaves marginalized and rural families choosing between interstate travel for supplemental medical care or no care at all. Abortion access and reproductive health services in general make it harder to manage our family choices, as well as raise the families we have, with a looming risk of death. But above all, we're disgustingly comfortable with women and birthing people surrendering decades of their lives and passions so someone else has a great start. I don't believe giving birth should cost me my life. I'm creating a framework called FreeBlackmotherhood to actively challenge the lineage of party sequitur ventrum and the expectation that I should guide to motherhood. I've decided I show up best for my children and family when I'm emotionally and mentally well. I see my work with FreeBlackmotherhood as both parts living gallery and living protest. I refuse to accept that my choice to be a mother should cost me my life. My children experience true freedom when they don't see life as a conveyor belt where parenthood equals death. But it's also bigger than that. It's intensified my belief that motherhood is serious. It places the world's weight on your shoulder, and without support, we're all at risk for harm. How do we expect mothers to support children empathetically without resources? And what are the resources? Well, as y'all see by now, I'm a woman with many opinions. I have some guesses on what those resources would be if it were up to me. The first resource is the agency to choose when we become mothers. Parenting is too hard to be forced into. Healthy mothers and mothering people are the core of healthy communities. We know maternal death rates are higher in states that restrict abortion. When mothering people have food, we nourish our communities. When we have adequate reproductive agency and access to care, we choose to model the joys of life. Second, community. We need space to find ourselves and stop pretending this work isn't hard. We also need to move toward a verb of mothering that says all people are capable of supporting a child's development, not just a mom. We must dismantle the systems that keep mothers, especially Black and brown mothers, out of the spaces to share our stories. And lastly, we need to encourage mothers to see parenting as a chapter of their lives, not an entire book. Raising children to have a healthy sense of self is hard if you don't have a sense of self. Where are the spaces for mothers to reframe motherhood? When we have access to affordable education, we teach our children how to love themselves and the world around them. When we lean into the practice of motherhood as a humanizing choice that brings all of us in alignment with community care, even if we choose to be child-free, we all win. But when we fail mothers, we fail communities. My motherhood doesn't have to be a death sentence. But to change things, we need to acknowledge that mothers can't come back for our children because we never left them. It's time for the community to come back for us. Thank you.